I'm Steve Morgan, founder of Cybersecurity Ventures and editor-in-chief at Cybercrime magazine, with another episode of Evolution Equity TV, sponsored by Evolution Equity Partners. Watch more at evolutionequity.tv. I'm here today with Deneen DeFiore, Vice President and Chief Information Security Officer at United Airlines, one of the world's largest airlines with around 93,000 employees. Previously, Deneen spent nearly 20 years at GE and was most recently Senior Vice President, Global Chief Information and Product Security Officer at GE Aviation. Deneen, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
It's great to be here. Thanks, Steve.
So, Deneen, we have interviewed hundreds of CISOs. You're one of my favorite stories. I've told your story to my daughters, to a lot of people who follow us. You've told it before, but I'm going to ask you to tell us again. You taught yourself how to code. How did you get started in this industry?
Sure. So it was kind of by chance. I don't have a traditional engineering or computer science background. I actually studied biology in college and was working towards a healthcare, let's say, administration degree for graduate school. I was interning, doing a little bit of work at a hospital system that was going through electronic medical records transition, and found through that experience that I really enjoyed the technology aspect and learning how technology could enhance business processes than the actual operations piece. So, got into tech that way, did that for a few years, had different careers and different paths across multiple domains in technology. And then, again, kind of by chance, was a CIO got to the CIO role at one of our business units at a company I was at, and we had a cyber incident. And through that experience of managing the incident and remediation, I loved it. I really figured out the risk management piece and how that impacted operations. And, since then, I never looked back. I've been in cyber now since like 2010, I believe.
And you taught yourself how to code early on, right?
I did, because again, I had a science background, but I didn't have the tech background. So going through that process of learning how to use systems, I needed to know how to do data flows and writing reports, coding, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, definitely. And I still do that today. As technology changes dynamically and threats evolve so rapidly, that you really need to be able to do that just-in-time learning. So that's something I do all the time.
Right. And that was before YouTube told us how to do everything, and and we had all of the online courseware. So, that ties into a lot of people who are out there, Deneen, who are faced with career uncertainties in a lot of different fields. And I think people are intrigued by cyber. It's become mainstream. It's headline news now. We're constantly reading about cybercrime. But I do think people think about it and then it's just too daunting. They feel like it's too technical. And here we are with 3.5 million openings. We're looking for a lot of entry-level people. What do you have to say to people who are, thinking about it, but maybe, it's a little scary for them?
Cybersecurity is multiple disciplines. It's not all red teaming or pen testing or incident response. There's a lot of different disciplines, and I'll say even transferable skills within cybersecurity that make it all tick. So if you have, if you want to start in cybersecurity and you have a great communication and writing skills, that is a very, very hot commodity to be able to use in a cyber career. If you are working in procurement or third-party vendor management, again, great transferable skills. So I would definitely encourage anyone that has, good business acumen and understanding of operations to take the leap. You're able to learn cyber and augment the skill sets you have.
Yeah, and I think sometimes you have to, give people opportunities. There's so many programs out there now. Google recently introduced a cybersecurity certificate program. It's available through Coursera, and it's only $49 a month. It's very affordable. We actually, put it out to our employees here, and we have people who are in, non-cyber roles, obviously, and we had, 5 people jump at it, and they're now, in the program. So there really is a lot out there. Let me shift gears. I want to ask you about women in our field. You were in a book that we published, Women Know Cyber, 100 Fascinating Females Fighting Cybercrime. We're publishing the second edition. You'll be in that too later this year with 150 women. Women represented about 10% of the roles in our industry, 2013, so that's about a decade ago. And now we're looking at about 25%, and the numbers are moving towards 30%. Are you seeing that in your everyday position, where you are, your colleagues, when you're out at events? Are you seeing more women in the field?
Yeah, I definitely see there is an increase in women in cybersecurity, and I love it. I think we still have work to do. We still have progress to make, but there is a trend that I'm seeing, women get into the field. And it's also good because, I think we're expanding, I'll say, the role of what a cyber role is. So that gives the women, that maybe don't have traditional backgrounds in computer science and engineering to come in and start a career in cybersecurity and grow and flourish and be super successful.
So what about, CISO positions, the Fortune 500? We do an analysis every year, and we go straight down the Fortune 500 from number 1 to number 500. You're there, you're one of the CISOs, but the numbers are lower. We see statistically 17% of those positions are filled by women, and that number hasn't changed much in the past 3 years. Do you have any observations about that?
Yeah, well, I think it's probably analogous. We're actually doing better than the female women CEOs in the Fortune 500. I think they hover around 9 or 10% if I have my facts correct. So, we're doing better than that. Again, progress to be made, and I think as we get more women into the field and start to, have career paths that are defined and manageable and flexible and, fulfilling and challenging, that will get more women to go up to those positions and see that number, accelerate, hopefully.
So on the black hat side, cyber criminals are largely perceived to be male. At least I hear that from a lot of people. Trend Micro put out a report. I read the report twice. It was interesting, very well written and very well researched. And it dispelled the myth. It finds that approximately 30% of cyber criminal forum participants are women. So women are being recruited by cyber, but it's not just cybersecurity. Do you think the black hats are making a push to, recruit women? Are they onto something?
Yeah, I wrote that study too. I thought it was really interesting, and I guess on the dark web and in those cybercrime forums, you're not really sure who's who. So I think that maybe the identification methodology, we're making assumptions, but it was a very interesting statistic. It shows though that maybe that is that forum that if you're anonymous, that you're being looked at for your skill set, right? And your contributions and what you can add, whether it is on the up and up or not, that's another question. But, that type of forum is probably easier to get your skill set out there and used and valued in some ways.
So Deneen, I know you don't have an easy job. You never will as long as you're a CISO. I mean, you're out there on the front lines, but are things any better? Is it any easier to be a CISO now than it was a decade ago? We have new vendors, we have new tools. We're, talking more and more about this, and yet there are constantly new threats. What is it like to be a CISO now?
Depending on the organization you're in and things like that, the CISO role is, it's not apples to apples, but I think in general, especially in the, like you said, Fortune 500, the CISO role is evolving from 10 years ago, it was a technical issue around technical controls and how to stop these really highly sophisticated hacks and things like that. Nowadays, it's really around all the things that we need to do, digital risk management for our businesses. So understanding how the organization works and what risks are being introduced so you can secure those business outcomes. So it's really a very valued business operations role, in addition to the technical acumen that you bring from a foundational perspective.
So when you get a Fortune 500 CISO, you can really want to dive in and talk about digital transformation, talk about, cloud security, so many different, quote, hot topics, talk about next generation threats, chat GPT. But I want to ask you about an age old threat. And maybe it's boring, but it's a huge problem and it's not going away. And that's phishing. And I'm amazed to see the level and sophistication of phishing attacks, given our industry has thrown so much at it. Can you comment, what are you seeing, Deneen, maybe, from the standpoint of, aviation, which is where you've spent so much time?
So phishing, like many organizations, is our number one, attack vector in aviation. It's, it relies on that human interaction, and we rely on tools and detection tools that block a lot of that. But really sophisticated phishing and social engineering attempts rely on the person to identify them, right? So that'll always be, I think, one of the ways that cyber criminals launch attacks. And I'm concerned particularly with the onset of Gen AI, because those attempts are going to be way more realistic, right? Instead of bad grammar or a misspelling or word choices, right? The context that can be created, especially on very sophisticated topics that will resemble really legitimate business conversations, is going to be something that we all need to keep our eye on them. And we've seen, specific to aviation, there's certain situations that you need to have the context and understanding of how an airline or how a OEM, a supplier, works, and it's going to be easier and easier to do that in a more realistic way with some of the new technologies that are being developed.
So on that phishing topic, Deneen, you're a CISO, you have a team who works for you, you're a large enterprise, of course, and so that's what we expect. But what about small businesses? What about, a company, whether they're in aviation or in any other industry, and they have 20 people, 50 people, 100 people, so they don't have a CISO. They probably don't have a CIO. They might have a minimal, staff. What can they do to, protect themselves?
Sure. So I think, there are some, some services that are, targeted towards small and medium-sized businesses with monitoring, and detection solutions that businesses can take advantage of. But it really becomes an awareness issue as well, too. Everybody has to use technology and is a digital native nowadays. So being aware of those digital risks and educating yourselves is really important to be able to identify something that looks suspicious and not right. So I think that's one of the things that we have to keep an eye on and make sure that we're all kind of, educating ourselves, and we have responsibility just in the as everyday citizens, just in the environments that we operate in and how we live our lives from a day-to-day perspective.
So, Deneen, you've introduced me to a few other CISOs, which I really appreciated. And this goes back to when you were with GE Aviation, and I, keep in touch with those people. So, it's all about networking. I'm curious, what are you hearing from other CISOs? Not what you're observing yourself directly, but what are you hearing from your colleagues? What are their, biggest concerns right now?
It always is evolving, right? But I think, it's kind of the same as well, too. So, of course, the Gen AI pieces are, how Gen AI can be used not only for good, but for bad. So that's a big topic in forums, along with the increased regulatory oversight of all industries based on the elevation and acceleration of incidents that we're seeing, be it still being ransomware or, account takeovers, whatever it is. Lots of organizations are still experiencing those, and then the oversight from regulatory agencies are kind of coming back with regulations. So a lot of effort and time from CISOs trying to sort through what that means and how do we be compliant, but also manage risk in a meaningful way. So those are a couple things. And then we have what I always say are the kind of, table stakes, right? It's identity and access management. Identity is always is the linchpin of any security strategy, and making sure that you have strong authentication, MFA, and it's really a part of your cybersecurity strategy is really important. There's a lot of digital transformations that are being kicked off that center around identity, zero trust, micro-segmentation, that all focus around that access management principles. So that's kind of what I'm hearing. And then lastly, third-party risk. Our ecosystems are not just our networks and our users, but it's the whole, the whole attack surface is that ecosystem that we operate in. So, thousands of suppliers in most organizations that we have to worry about and figure out how we all manage that risk collectively.
So reading between the lines, Deneen, you have some concerns about AI, and I do as well. So maybe you can come back on and talk to us about that.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's amazing to me how fast the technology, the uptake of it has been, not just from a consumer standpoint, but in the businesses, in organizations with large language modules and the Gen AI technology. So developing a responsible framework around the use and management of that is really key to a lot of folks.
Well, we'll look forward to having you back on then, Deneen. So definitely something we need to talk about. As always, it was great to have you with us today. We'll be back soon with another episode of Evolution Equity TV, sponsored by Evolution Equity Partners. Watch more at evolutionequity.tv. I'm Steve Morgan, founder of Cybersecurity Ventures and editor-in-chief at Cybercrime Magazine. You can follow all of our media at cybercrimemagazine.com.